The Joe Rogan Experience.
Hey Joe, how's it going? Okay, well, I'll get straight into it then. So I've come up with an ideology I call selectionism, and it's official. I've already designed some flags. So there's a common theme in all of these. Basically, the red represents the people sacrificed for the greater good, with the centrepiece symbolising that, and the green and gold represents the rest of the Australian population who live better lives because of this sacrifice. So in this one, we've got a guy pushing a lesser person in front of a bus.
I'm really good at that.
Yeah, see, everyone does it already. Why wouldn't you?
It's definitely not crazy.
No, not at all. If you want to protect your livelihood, you should push at least one person in front of a bus every day. Bonus points to the homeless.
100%.
Yeah. Alright, let's move on to the ideas. So there's this thing called the economic problem, and basically it's the idea that human wants and needs are unlimited while resources are limited. And so the problem is we'll run out of resources if our trends of consumption continue, which are only getting worse as the population increases and resource extraction becomes more efficient.
That's all going to happen. It's not a matter of whether it's going to happen, it's a matter of when is it going to happen.
Yeah, and one of the first major resources to run out could be oil, 50 years from now, which is not only used to power cars and vehicles, but for making plastics and synthetic materials.
Yeah.
Then natural gas in 52 years, a major source of power, particularly for heating. Phosphorus, 50 to 100 years, this is essential for plant growth, bone structure, and even DNA creation.
Is it possible that things could get better?
Yes, so under my party of one, the Selectionist Party, there will be less people, which will mean less wants and needs, so more resources to go around, which will lead to higher living standards, a better environment, and drastic mitigation of the economic problem. So how I'm going to do this, and what is most central to selectionism, is population control, with 4 legislative acts that will make Australia great again. First will be the Birth Control Act. The first section will outline child limits with a maximum of 2 children per female, regardless of context. Any offence will carry a minimum penalty of 10 years imprisonment for all biological parents associated, and children violating the limit will be euthanised accordingly. The second section will outline a conception application process with legal agreements from both parents and government approval required before legally having a child. Offences will carry fines and potential termination of pregnancy. The third and final section will outline mandatory contraceptive medication, so the pill, with monthly checkups and distribution of prescriptions required unless conception application has been filed and approved. Offences will carry fines and potential removal or otherwise redundancy of reproductive organs for both the female and male associate. Now, second will be the Life Control Act. The first section of this will outline freedom of choice when it comes to euthanasia, with 18 as the minimum age of consent. Eligible applicants will be swiftly accommodated with no decision change after consent forms have been signed. The first section will outline mandatory euthanasia for all citizens at 20 years past their retirement, or otherwise at the age of 120. Offenders will be euthanised slowly, and any remaining pension will go to the government. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, great. The third section will outline medically determined euthanasia, with specialist euthanasia doctors allowed to determine life outcomes for patients suffering extreme pain, illness, or otherwise debilitating conditions. Offenders will suffer anyway, but with this process they're being sent to a better place.
Yeah.
Now, this may all sound a bit abstract, but the statistics don't lie and something needs to change. In 2017, Australia's population increased by 325,000. There were 309,000 registered births, 160,000 deaths, and 176,000 permanent or long-term immigrations. So that was a population increase of 2 people for every 1 death, and that ratio is only going to increase with our current laws, along with the percentage of Australians living below the internationally accepted poverty line, currently estimated at 13.3%. That's more than 1 in 10 people, which will only get worse because the growing population will increase demands while supplies will drop as resources are depleted at an unsustainable rate, making everything more expensive and therefore less attainable with inflation. And with that, we'll see an increased percentage of tax money going towards welfare, which is a slippery slope to an economy breakdown and fuels the problem rather than fixing it. The overpopulation issue has a snowball effect that can only really be stopped at its root cause. Now, under my selectionist party of 1, these are my rough projections for major population changes within 5 short years. I will make Australia great again. And just to be clear, if you take a broader perspective, you can already see the effects of overpopulation in other countries as the governments face much greater challenges in just trying to sustain their numbers, let alone have them thrive. Look at India. They have a population of 1.34 billion, of which 1 in 5 are poor. 1 in 5 out of 1.34 billion. Do the math. That's 270 million people poor. And then of that, 100 million of them live in slums. The currency is the rupee, and 1,000 of them will get you $20 here. That's nothing. Look at South Africa. 56.7 million people, 55% of them live on less than 250 Rand a week, which again converts to just $25 here. And 14 million, or otherwise 1 in 4 of them, live in extreme poverty.
If you looked at all the zeros on that number, you wouldn't even be able to wrap your head around it. You'd be like, what? What's a billion? How many zeros is that?
Yeah. Now, by no means is Australia on the verge of collapsing into a third world country. But with the current systems we have in place, there will be an inevitable decline in living standards, and people don't need to be in extreme poverty to be unhappy with their lives. It's usually as simple as being unsatisfied with your job.
67% people in this country don't like what they do, or are just sleepwalking through their life. There's another significant percent that hate what they do, and then there's a few left over that love what they do. I mean, it's a very small number of people, maybe like myself or maybe like yourself, that actually enjoy what they do for a living and feel like they're following their passion. Most people are just working a job and they fucking hate it. And then when they get off work, they want to get fucked up. And a lot of these people, they have psychological issues. They're suffering from abuse, childhood abuse. They're trying to, there's been some significant statistics about childhood abuse and how many people from childhood abuse wind up using and abusing drugs and becoming addicted and even overdosing on drugs. And it's ridiculously high. It's about pain and suffering and trying to remove that pain and suffering from your life. And, people that don't know how to make healthy choices and don't have friends that are making healthy choices and don't know what to do with their life.
Yeah, so why let that continue and be passed down through generations? People are born into it, so why not stop that from happening at all? And that's where the Birth and Life Control Acts would play a part, but to stop these low socioeconomic situations from even occurring, there will be the Welfare and Medical Control Acts. The Welfare Control Act will have one section outlining the removal of unemployment benefits and halving of welfare cash payments for specific populations, which in 2015 to 16 was a combined $115 billion. Meaning the government would save in excess of $62 billion a year. Now, they wouldn't just pocket this, it would be reinvested into education, rehabilitation, counselling and law enforcement services. The Medical Control Act will also have one section outlining the removal of all free public healthcare systems, saving upwards of $50 billion a year for the government, which would also be reinvested in education, rehabilitation, counselling and law enforcement services. So these acts will force a survival of the fittest culture and make people either support themselves more than the government or die, which will lead to great suffering in the short term but far less in the long term. It will take care of the crackheads, pot smokers, tree huggers, hobos, you name it. Because every person on Centrelink I've ever met has been one of those four, so that's what they all are. And it will take care of them whilst lifting up the everyday tradie, the standard 9-to-5 workers, ordinary Australians that have their shit together and can support themselves and a family, who can afford a Bunnings snag, who can afford 10 stubbies at the pub before driving home, who can afford to put roast chicken on their plate every night, who can afford to cover their toast in Vegemite, who can afford thongs to hang on their Christmas tree, who can afford to be Australian. But sure, there will be people who protest to these acts at first. Why wouldn't the dog bludgers? But with the major investments in law enforcement, they'll be swiftly accommodated in cosy 9x9 prison cells. Now, the reason many people overlook the threat of overpopulation and the economic problem is because it's happening slowly. And I cite the boiling frog syndrome as a perfect example of what is happening to humanity. And that is the idea that if you suddenly put a frog in a pot of boiling water, it will hop out, just as people react to immediate consequence. But if you put a frog in a pot of cold water and slowly raise it to boiling temperature, the frog won't sense the danger and will be cooked alive. Just as people don't understand or choose to ignore that every piece of litter, every long shower, every light left on, every drive to and from work, every life prolonged in hospital, every child born, makes a tiny difference to the water temperature. But when it goes beyond one person and doesn't have an immediate consequence, it's difficult for most people to see the value in them changing their habits for something that goes so far beyond them, and it might not even affect them. but instead it will affect their great-grandchildren or people in other countries. And that's why there has to be systematic changes. And that has to start somewhere, which is where my Selectionist Party comes in. I will make Australia great again. Anyway, there's lots of statistics and principles that support selectionism. They can't all be wrong. Besides, do you remember your first time pushing someone in front of a bus?
It was like the happiest moment of my life.
Exactly. All I want to do is make people happy. Does that make sense? Do you agree with selectionism?
Yeah.
Great.
Did you see that guy accidentally hit that moose with his car?
No?
Holy shit. Jamie, pull that video up.
Oh my god, oh my god. Oh my god.
Okay, I'm gonna bust a move. You know.
No, don't go away! Don't go away! Ah, fuck!